Welcome to the WPAOG podcast, brought to you by the Association of Graduates. Tune in as we continue our mission of making the Long Gray Line the most highly connected alumni body in the world. Reporting directly from the United States Military Academy at West Point, let's go Army!
Welcome to episode 3 of the WPAOG podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lyons, class of 1983, proud to be, and a major giving officer at the Association of Graduates. We recently had the privilege of having our Director of Athletics, Mike Buddie, sit down with Rich DeMarco, an Associate Athletic Director and radio play-by-play broadcaster for the Army Black Knights. They talked about the upcoming sports season here at the Academy while reflecting on the success of last year's athletic season, despite being in a pandemic. Mike also spoke of his time as a New York Yankee, plus college athlete likenesses, the Mikey Stadium Preservation Project, and more. Let's get right into this exclusive interview recorded live from Herbert Hall.
This is Rich DeMarco. I work here at West Point as an Associate Athletic Director. I also have the opportunity and just a really dream to be able to call the Army football games, men's basketball games on the radio, and also interact a lot with our tremendous graduates and Army fans, as we like to say, throughout the Hudson Valley, across the nation, and around the world. And I'd like to welcome here to the podcast, and it's great to be spending a few minutes with the Director of Intercollegiate Athletics here at West Point. That's Mike Buddie. Mike, welcome. This is going to be a lot of fun to talk here for a few minutes.
Yeah, Rich, always great to have the opportunity to sit down with you, talk a little bit about the incredible place that West Point is and the role that our cadet athletes play in its success.
So you've been at West Point just over 2 years as athletic director. Let's take it back, though, to your life growing up in Ohio, obviously a tremendous youth high school athlete, and then the road which took you to Wake Forest, professional sports, and then back to college to end up here at West Point.
Yeah, certainly. So, the one, I guess the one consistent message or connective tissue in my upbringing, certainly, I'm the youngest of three boys. Grew up, as you said, a suburb of Cleveland, wrestling mat in the basement, football, we lined our driveway like a football field, and, I had a pitcher's mound, all that stuff. So, being the youngest of 3 boys, very competitive family. But I also was the son, and still am the son, of 2 educators, right? So my mother taught high school English. My father was a high school math teacher. And so everything that my brothers and I did was always at the intersection of athletics and academics. We weren't allowed to pick up a Frisbee or a baseball or a hockey stick until our homework was done. And so that was instilled at me at a young age. And as you alluded to, I've been blessed to have 2 very distinct careers, I think, that are unique. And I just feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to be a professional baseball player, played 13 seasons in the minor leagues and some at the major league level. And then, I retired. I snapped a ligament in my elbow. I was 34 years old with a wife and 2 children and a mortgage. And, you have that wake-up call that you need to have a job and you need to make a living. And so, honestly, I always thought that I would go into coaching. 10 years in the Yankee organization, I thought I'd maybe go into a front office role. But by the time I finished playing, it was clear to me that lifestyle is not conducive to being the type of father and husband that I wanted to be. And so I fell into this second career, Rich, and I started as a fundraiser at my alma mater, Wake Forest. I had to go back at the age of 34 to finish my last semester of college. So I was a full-time learner at that ripe old age. The movie Old School had just come out, so Will Ferrell was on the big screen, and here I am as a senior in college with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old on my lap.
Right? You're
That's
Blue.
Right. He's my boy Blue. So all of that was just, a really unique opportunity that, I could be a little bit selective. I looked into coaching college baseball, but I realized that college coaches work nights and weekends. And so I fell into this administration opportunity, and it's just been a great fit. I think it fits my personality fairly well, my skill set. Some of our coaches might argue that it doesn't fit my skill set at all, but I just feel blessed. And so started at my alma mater, became the athletic director at Furman University in 2015, and then 2019 I got this opportunity to come interview at West Point. And as so many of our listeners and our graduates know, if you get the opportunity to meet some of the colonels and generals that that make this place successfully operate. The minute I sat down with General Williams, I knew, I shifted my gears from, hey, is West Point a job that I'm interested in? And I immediately approached it as, how do I convince these people that I deserve this opportunity, and I feel fortunate every day to have the opportunity.
Mike, just a couple questions about that road to West Point. Obviously, a lot of folks, a lot of casual sports fans know you as a Yankees pitcher in the late 90s during some of the greatest times of any Major League Baseball team they've had, a couple of World Series titles. You played under Joe Torre. What was the biggest piece of advice, best piece of advice he gave you?
So there were a lot, and I think Joe's strengths were transparency and communication, and it seems simple, but that's as I think about him as a leader, and now in my role, if you're transparent and you communicate to people as grown-ups, I think it goes a long way. And so, Joe he had a pretty good lineup. I tell people my daughter probably could have filled out the lineup card and we'd have still won the World Series. But at the end of the day, it's managing expectations. It's clearly communicating what your expectations are, what you will condone, and what you won't condone. And so, as I go into my second career here, I think back to those lessons and those conversations. Coaches all the time will tell you they recruit young people for a living. The best answer they can get is yes. The next best answer they can get is no. The worst answer they can get is maybe, because you have to continue to work. And so I've taken that philosophy. Coaches are the same way with me. If it's a budget request, I either need to tell them yes or no. Dragging it out and making them kind of hang in the wind for a while is not very good. And that's, again, Joe Torre, when I would get called up, Joe would say, hey, you're here for 14 days. Whether you throw 20 scoreless innings or you give up 20 runs in one inning, like the minute Jeff Nelson's healthy, you're going back to AAA. And it really, just that transparency and communication, it took a lot of pressure off of you. And so I try to bring some of those lessons into my day-to-day role. Greatest
memory on the field for you?
Well, I got my first major league win. Opening day, 1998, the Yankees home opener. We'd opened on the West Coast, 55,000 people, early April, the first of 114 regular season wins that year. To get that win was pretty cool. After it was not an easy road for me. Derek Jeter and I were drafted the same year. One of us accelerated and became the Rookie of the Year and won a couple World Series before I had even gotten my opportunity to have one day in the big league. So to be the winning pitcher on opening day on a roster like that was certainly memorable.
You also had a movie career during your time as a pitcher. For Love of the Game, you were Kevin Costner's coach, had a small role in that film. How about that experience? How much fun was it? And a lot of people maybe remember you from that as well.
Well, I think calling it a career is probably being a little bit generous, Rich. But yeah, you know what? It was one of those, as I look back to the 1998 year, to your point, I won 4 games that year as a relief pitcher on the roster. The season ends and this role falls into my lap. Somebody else had to back out of being the starting Yankee pitcher for that movie, for Love of the Game. And, I found myself, we celebrated a World Series championship. 2 days later, I move into the Waldorf Astoria with my wife, and we stayed there for 6 weeks while shooting this movie every day, getting on a van, going from Midtown up to the Bronx. And some days we would film, some days the weather didn't look right, so we literally just kind of hung out in the locker room. And, my wife certainly was glad that I did it because she got to meet Kevin Costner and spend some time with him. But yeah, it was an interesting, right? I mean, to go from a major league season and then into this second industry, that of major motion pictures, was eye-opening. It was great, get to meet and rub elbows with some phenomenal people, and then you sit back and wait for the movie to come out, and turns out, I'm in there for a whopping 2.8 seconds, and I probably made a good decision to hang it up and go back to school at that point.
So going back to school and after your playing career had ended, and you mentioned having to finish your degree, becoming a fundraiser, and really starting at the bottom in college athletics, right? We see professional athletes who retire, immediately become associate ADs, assistant ADs, become athletic directors even with no collegiate experience. Not like you could compare it to anything else, what it would have been like if you had that opportunity as a high-ranking executive. But how do you think, from where you started in college athletics, having to finish your degree at 34, being a fundraiser, how that shaped you moving up the ladder to now becoming an athletic director?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Rich. So, would I have preferred to start, at the higher level, become an associate AD? Absolutely, at the time I would have, but I would not have learned all of the necessary skills and traits that I have now. And, never more so evident than right now. We're in this great campaign to raise money, and a lot of times you just get thrown into this associate AD level, but you really don't understand the mechanics and the operations behind fundraising and all the things that need to be considered before soliciting anybody for a gift. And so, obviously it wasn't by design, but I was glad that I started on the lower rungs of that world and had to earn the opportunity to grow and to continue to learn how to become better in that role. And shifted from fundraising into administration. You get the opportunity to start making tough personnel decisions. And so a lot of people that, if Chris Paul or Tim Duncan were to go back to Wake Forest, they probably would have started as senior level administrators because of their name recognition. But they wouldn't have had to fight through some of those challenges that carve us into who we become.
So a decade at Wake Forest, obviously time at Furman before coming to West Point, your time as a professional athlete. I don't know if any of it could have compared or prepared you for the last 2 years being the Army West Point athletic director.
Very few people, I think, would be prepared to have seen COVID coming, and all the ancillary challenges, right? The social challenges, the political climate that we found ourselves in, the economic crunch. And so, you and I have spoken before, Rich, about this. I feel lucky that General Williams happens to be my boss. The one man who may have some experience dealing with pandemics in his time with the Ebola outbreak in Liberia, and he just happens to be running West Point. And so, for better or for worse, Rich, I had 7 or 8 months under my belt of normal operating procedure before this hit. It would have been great to have another year to have just built up a higher level of trust and communication with my staff, but none of us really saw this coming until it was too late to do much about it. And so I feel extremely fortunate to be surrounded by colonels and generals here at West Point who truly understand what it means to fight through adversity. They understand what it means to circle the wagons and have all hands on deck. And that was very evident early on that, some of my colleagues across the country are having to figure out how are they going to pay for testing, how are they going to get, medical folks on board to help. And West Point just stepped up and said, hey, we need medical people, we're going to get medical people. We need to find tests, we're going to find tests. And that put me in a position to allow our young men and women who represent the Academy in competition to still have opportunities to compete.
Mike, we're speaking to graduates, to Army athletics fans everywhere. What were some of the toughest decisions and maybe eventualities that almost had to happen out of COVID, but because of support, you say from General Williams, from the Association of Graduates, from the Army A Club, you were able to stave off, just to really put in perspective how dire things were closer to becoming?
Well, certainly anytime that you're dealing with human life. So we are a business, as you know. The AWPAA was put into formation in 2017. Our expectation is to be as financially secure and independent as possible. And so when this hit, not unlike Michigan and Florida and Arizona and every other university in the country, revenues dwindled, if not disappeared. And so we had to make some tough decisions. We had the entire athletics department, about 280 of us, had to take pay reductions. Some voluntary, some mandated, depending on your contract status. We eliminated 11 positions, and those were 11 of our teammates. As you and I know, these are people that you come to work with every day, but sadly there was no work to be done, and so you have these opportunities to weigh the pros and cons of having to make these really difficult decisions, and those were certainly some of the most difficult when you eliminate a position during a pandemic. Those are gut-wrenching, but we had to do it in support of the mission of what we try to do, and that's provide an unparalleled Division I experience for our cadet athletes. And so those were, to this day, are still, looking back, just tremendously difficult decisions to make. But we emerged on the other side of this pandemic with a couple $1 million deficit, which is a lot of money. But when you read the rest of the country having 30, 40, $50 million departmental deficits, and a lot of them are getting loans from the university to cover that deficit. Well, we can't take a loan from West Point. It's taxpayer money, and we respect that. So we had to be very, very frugal, tighten up our belts, and minimize our expenses, knowing that our revenues were going to take a hit.
Mike, you mentioned earlier about learning from Joe Torre transparency, right? Something which is, as an athlete, is appreciated, and you work with your coaches in the same way. Transparency of finances, especially in light of COVID. How much did COVID, I guess, really crystallize that need and maybe reassure you, your philosophy of transparency? You have to be that way now moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, there's this, I call it a phenomenon, right? It's amazing when you become a part of a business. Oftentimes, people who control budgets don't treat their departmental budget the same way they treat their personal finances. And I've used this as an opportunity. If you didn't personally have the money in your bank account, Rich, then you're probably not going to spend the money. Yet we had some people who just viewed it as, hey, I'm just going to spend what I need to spend. And so we used it as a great opportunity to kind of tighten our belts. And the timing of me having just gotten here, it gave us an opportunity for every budget manager to look at their own budget and not just say, hey, I spent $300,000 last year, I need $300,000 this year. We did a zero-based budgeting exercise where everybody had to truly look and say, is it a need or is it a want? And we had to eliminate most of the wants and focus just on the true things that we need. And to their credit, most of our coaches, of our 30 varsity sports, they did a phenomenal job. And they realized, hey, you know what, we can do without the third optional uniform this year. We can do, we played fewer games, so we don't need to order a dozen soccer balls. And so every little penny mattered, especially as it was touch and go a year ago, Rich, as we headed into the fall, not knowing if we would be able to field a football team for 5 home games and therefore have our CBS contract kick into effect. And so all those things that we were monitoring extremely closely, trying to be transparent, but also trying to educate our coaches that we had to fight through the financial challenges, not just for 1 year. We didn't know, and here we are a year later, and Delta's here, and so we're not going to let our guard down, and we're going to make sure that we protect the opportunities that we have to provide to these young people.
How important are endowments to the long-term health of athletics programs?
Invaluable. They've always, endowed funds are a way to future-proof your area or your program. My previous stops, we always focused on endowment. We were trying to endow scholarships because that's the one way that you can always know there's going to be opportunities for young people. We're in a phenomenal position here where we don't have to worry about the scholarship angle. But when you get hit with a pandemic, some of our teams have built endowments. And so that 4 to 5% spinoff every year provides extra dollars. And so in a year where the athletic director's budget may not be able to cover team building or a trip to play in your senior's hometown, those coaches who had endowments were able to rely on some of that money. We didn't have summer camps for the past 18 months. Some of our assistant coaches rely on camp income to make ends meet. And so again, we were able to utilize some of our endowments. And ironically, my first year here, we started the conversation about how do we build these to successfully position each team into the future. And when Stanford University has to drop 11 sports, that just shows you the dire straits that some of our counterparts found themselves in. And so it's an active push for us. If you're passionate about men's rugby, let's find a way to contribute to the men's rugby endowment so that on rainy days or pandemic years, there will be funds available, and we don't take those things for granted.
So when we talk about finances, we talk about endowments, we talk about revenue. I think a big buzzword across college athletics here over the past couple of months is conference realignment and future potential conference realignment. Of course, the big news, Oklahoma and Texas stating their intention to join the Southeastern Conference, the ACC, the Big Ten, Pac-12 forming an alliance of sorts. Conference realignment, there's a lot of money in there. There's a lot of opportunity in there. Where does Army sit, and you sit with Army's potential options with all the conference realignment we've seen and probably will see in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, and if you had a crystal ball, I'd love for you to share it with me, Rich.
I have a magic 8-ball.
Yeah, it is decidedly so. So you're right. I mean, this is the national conversation, right? And we as an industry have put ourselves in this position. Sadly, I'm disappointed in the national narrative, and that is we hear about it on ESPN radio. We hear governors of some of these states where they're talking about television, football, money, television, football, money, and money. And what we're not hearing enough of is scholarships, graduation, education, and excellence. And so, ironically, I spent last week a couple days in South Bend, Indiana, and was lucky enough to have a few hours of FaceTime with the athletic director at Notre Dame, Jack Swarbrick, who has been one of the few voices, in my opinion, on the national stage, who's reminding people that a lot of students choose their college based on the education. Not everybody chooses it because they're going to get playing time or the coach or the weight room or the facilities or the number of shoes that you get. And that's an important narrative that's not been told enough. And so, I spent a lot of time, with Jack Swarbrick, because he's kind of the godfather of the FBS independent footballs, right? So the college football playoff, should it expand to 12 teams, selfishly, I was there to make sure that Jack understood that Army needs to stay on the radar. It's important to us as an independent. We value our independence. We have a international following of young men and women, service people who care about Army football. Talked about conference affiliation, right? They are an ACC team in every sport except football. So certainly picked his brain a little bit about the nuances and how do you market yourself as a football independent program. And all of that to say, Rich, I'm happy that this alliance between the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the ACC, they are starting to talk about graduation, and they're talking about education, and they're talking about broad-based athletics programs. It's not just about football and not just about money. Those things certainly are interconnected and important. But as you and I know, we value our independence. Coach Munkin and I are in constant communication about scheduling opportunities. Being able to control who you play, when you play them, and where you play them is very important to us. It's a recipe that has worked. You know that there was a recipe that we joined the Conference USA and it didn't work as well. And so certainly it's my job to have my ear to the ground and understand the intricacies of decisions that are being made and decisions that are being contemplated, and making sure that Army is in a position of strength. And so I'm trying to be as proactive as possible, understanding what the shift out there could look like, what that means for us, and making sure that Army football, certainly, but then all of our other 29 sports are in a position that our young people can continue to excel in what they're trying to do.
Just back to the college football playoff and the potential expansion to 12 teams. Are you confident that, it's going to take a special season from a group of 5 team to make that playoff? I don't think that's really an opinion, it's a fact. Are you confident that an Army football special season will have the Black Knights right there in consideration for a playoff spot?
That's certainly the plan. So absolutely. Now what we know is we'll need a little help. If the cards will have to align. As you said, we'll have to play extremely well. But the year before my arrival, Boo Corrigan's last year, 11 wins, right on the doorstep. You get the opportunity to play a team like Houston in a bowl game, and the world probably thought that was going to be a good matchup. Turned out it was certainly not a nail biter. And so certainly our intention is to schedule games that we can win. This year, I think, is a good example. We play an awful lot of bowl-eligible teams from a year ago, a lot of 7-5, 8-4 teams, and then you mix in a Wake Forest and a Wisconsin who give us an opportunity to get more national appreciation. But yeah, our plan is to schedule 11 or 12 wins and hope that it's a year where Central Florida or Cincinnati or even Notre Dame, aren't as strong as historically, and to be able to slide in to at least one position that I think will be held for a group of 5 institution. And so, we may not have to be ahead of Alabama and Clemson in the rankings, but if we're ahead of the other group of 5s and we've played and earned our way in, I'll promise you this, no one's going to want to play us.
2 other subjects across the landscape: name, image, likeness, and at West Point and the academies, the opportunity for a cadet athlete to go pro. So NIL has changed the landscape for student athletes across the country. I know it's different at the academies and at West Point. Same thing with going pro and the option to be able to pursue that as a career. If you just take us through how those 2 elements work in respect to West Point.
Certainly. So we'll start with the pro opportunity. It stemmed from President Trump. It actually stemmed from a meeting at the White House with our CIC championship teams, and it was a candid conversation that one of our athletes had with the president, and he sprung into action and made this a reality. And so what we know is it's a current reality. It doesn't mean that it's going to be an opportunity forever, but right now it's wonderful that the young men and women who choose to come to any of the 3 academies, if they develop physically into a position where they are opted into a professional league, whether it's hockey, whether it's baseball, soccer, football, certainly, or basketball. Historically, it's not been an option unless you get a specific exception to that policy. And the current policy is you don't need an exception. And so these young men and women, should they meet the criteria as laid out and enforced by the Secretary of the Army, they get the opportunity straight out of the academy to launch into an opportunity to be a professional in that sport. I think it's wonderful. Here's the great news, Rich. It hasn't changed the type of young men and women that we're recruiting. So no one is all of a sudden coming to play football or baseball or soccer at West Point because it's going to improve their draft status. They are still choosing to come here because they have a heart for service. They want to defend their country. They want to learn the leadership lessons that are taught so well here. And so I just love the fact that usually it's going to be young men and women who are under the radar. Look at John Radigan, for example. John didn't have a ton of offers coming out of high school. He chose to come to the academy. He worked his tail off. He put on weight. He gained flexibility, strength, speed, and now he's in a position to potentially earn a roster spot for the Seattle Seahawks. I think it's a wonderful story. He represents the academy extremely well. And then here's the deal. If he doesn't make the team and next year he gets no contracts offered, then we start his clock. He's not losing any of his service time. He's still going to serve 5 years as he originally signed up for. It's just, we delay it until they have the opportunity to serve those 5 years. So wonderful opportunity. Again, we're talking a couple people each year, and it doesn't change how we recruit, who we recruit at all. And then the second piece of your question, Rich, name, image, and likeness. But for better or for worse, as our cadets are considered active duty military, they cannot take advantage of name, image, likeness. And similar to my previous answer, it really doesn't change why young people are choosing to come to West Point. They see the value in the education, the military training, and serving their country, and that's going to continue to be the place. I told one of our coaches, if we're going to lose a recruit to another school because they're going to get $500 a month from a car dealership, then they weren't West Point material to begin with. And so the rest of the country is fighting through what this is going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what the implications will be, and we're just going to keep our heads down and keep spitting out second lieutenants of the highest character to lead our nation into battle, and that's what we're focused on.
And Mike, great point with the pro option. Really, a young man, young woman, they're going to have to develop when they're here to be put in that position. So it basically is, hey, things are changing all the time. Hey, if your athletic situation changes over the 4 years you develop to the point, hey, that opportunity is not going to be denied. So I think that's just a great way to look at it.
Well, and frankly, we've had a couple recent athletes who have turned down the opportunity to play professionally because the pay as a second lieutenant is more attractive than a developmental league, a minor league baseball, for example. And honestly, by the time their 47-month experience is up, I think a lot of them are so excited to get into their branch and start their career in the military that that they move on. And what a great advertisement for West Point. You know, they've turned down opportunities to be a professional athlete because they're that excited to stay with their friends and serve their country.
So let's now look long-term on the horizon and projects going on around West Point, and really the centerpiece of all the efforts right now, the Michie Stadium Preservation Project to completely renovate the east stands, east side of Michie Stadium, and really provide an unparalleled experience for our fans.
A once in a generation opportunity, in my opinion. And you know, Rich, you've been associated with West Point, much longer than I have. The rumor of this project, we think it's been around since the early 2000s. It's an obvious need. And here's what I love about this project in particular is we want it to look and feel like it's Michie Stadium, but to have a significant upgrade, a true premium experience. It's a great opportunity, and you know there's so many people, graduates who have already stepped up, been phenomenally generous with their treasure as well as their expertise and loaning a hand and helping us, maybe engage some of their classmates who have fallen out of contact with certainly the academy. So General Caslin and Buch Oregon started this as they both identified it as their number one priority. And then General Williams and myself have continued to keep it up on that pedestal. We were waiting for a time to launch it publicly where we felt with some confidence that we would successfully achieve it. And as you know, $95 million is a lot of money. I will say this: sooner or later, Michie Stadium is going to need significant work, and so we could wait another 5 years and build a new stadium, or 10 years or whatever it might be. But building a new stadium is $1 billion with a B, and so to spend $100 million, it will be 100% gift funded. There's no government monies that will be going into this project. To just give that east side a facelift, to create suites. Right now, there's 4 suites at Michie Stadium to speak of, and I would not consider them high-level premium opportunities. They are what they are. They're perfectly good for what the need that they serve. But we want to get into the 21st century. Coach Monken, it's important that the young people who do come here and that are fans understand that we are relevant, that competing, the physical pillar is always important here, and people matter and winning matters, and this will help us attract people and continue to win. And so whether it's club seats, loge boxes, ledge seats, or premium suites, it's kind of an a la carte menu. If you're interested in some of these products, they're here. If you're not, you continue to sit where you've always sat and enjoy the unparalleled Michie experience that you referred to.
It's funny you mentioned how long this is being thought of. I was hired at West Point in 2004. My first day, May 8th, 2004. I came on my interview in March of that year. When I came into the second floor of the ODIA building, 639 Howard Road, there was an easel with a rendering of a new building on the east end. So literally from my interview, it's always been in my mind that there was a plan for the east stands. Mike, you mentioned a lot of opportunities. How can folks listening, how can they get involved, whether it's information about premium spaces or contributing toward this?
Well, absolutely. So there's several levels, as you mentioned. One is charitable donation, right? So you can reach out to the A Club. You can go to the website and find out, giving. Certainly, we have links. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to share who are interested in sharing. But we also need to sell these seats, right? Every club seat that we sell is a signed commitment, as we view it. We want these seats to be full. The unique aspect of this renovation, Rich, is the cadets will stretch from goal line to goal line. So if you picture Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke basketball, the Cameron Crazies, they are wall to wall the entire length of the court. Well, we're going to do the same thing behind the opposing team's bench with cadets from goal line to goal line, and then these premium seating options are immediately above these people, the cadets. So a great connection of the long gray line, right? There'll be old grads in the suites, hopefully reaching down, giving high fives to the cadets who are in their seats. And so certainly you can go online. We're trying to sell these suites, sell the club seats, get commitments. We launched this less than 2 months ago. We've got about $65 million in pledges and commitments. And so we're not as far off as it might seem. $65 million into a $95 million project. We've had people step up beyond what we would have ever imagined. The generosity and just the leadership of our graduates it's mind-blowing.
Tremendous. That's going to be just a tremendous, tremendous project. Mike, 2020, 2021 was like no other year. I'm sure you've experienced, we've experienced, or will experience. How excited are you here for the 2021-2022 athletic and academic year?
Well, I'm thrilled, right? I mean, there's a reason that we work in college athletics, and it's not to manage budgets, and it's not to do COVID testing. It's to watch our young people develop as people. We talk about preparing to win, being as important as winning, right? No one's going to win everything, but understanding how to prepare to win. And so, suffering through a 12-month period where our kids were trying to prepare to win, but they weren't even sure who they were going to compete against, if they were going to compete. And so a new normalcy, a return. It's certainly not going to be like it was in 2019, but it's a heck of a lot closer this year than it was last year. And so as we launch into this season, early returns so far, we've gotten off to a great start in both of our soccer programs. Volleyball has hit the ground running. And so it's just great to see our young people out there. They're vaccinated, they're playing outside without masks on their face, and it's just refreshing to see. But, like we said, this is why we work in college athletics, and can't wait for our young people to continue to represent us on the fields of friendly strife.
Mike, this has been great spending some time here today, and you have me fired up. Like I didn't think I could be even more fired up, but I am here for this Army athletics season. Mike, any final words to our alumni, West Point community who are listening to us today?
Well, certainly a thank you, right? Some of the things that we were able to do, we sold out the Air Force football game last year, knowing that no one was going to be allowed in the stadium. And so, the thousands of members of the Long Gray Line have stepped up as they have for centuries. When the pandemic hit and we needed help, they helped. And so, it's thrilling for us. We got a lot of accolades for being able to find a way to play 12 football games and to get the Commander-in-Chief trophy back where it belongs. But really, none of us do this alone. And so to have the Long Gray Line behind us, so many phenomenal people who have made a difference in our country and certainly continue to make an impact here at West Point as a quote-unquote outsider, as a civilian, to have come in and been embraced by this community. My wife and children, we live here. We feel like we are part of the Long Gray Line, even though we have not had to suffer through a 47-month experience of our own. It's been humbling, and we're thrilled to be a part of such an amazing community of leaders.
The Association of Graduates would like to give a big thank you to Mike Buddie and Rich DeMarco for giving our alumni this special interview right on the cusp of the 2021 home football season opener. Once again, we thank you for listening to the WPAOG podcast, which is available to stream online directly to your mobile device at any time, any place in the world. Just search WPAOG podcast on popular streaming platforms and subscribe to the show for new monthly episodes. Go Army, beat them all.